The Vatican wants to change the tone when it comes to gays and same-sex couples. I got to start with you, the Catholic in the group. Are you impressed? I am, by the Pope and what he's doing here about opening the door to not just to gay people, but also for people with marriages. The first marriage may have been a disaster, and they're living with somebody else or married to someone else. Much different than it was when I was growing up.
It's a huge change in tone. It's a welcome, I think, by almost everybody. You know, we're welcoming people in. That this is such a departure from a time when people really did feel that the door had been closed.
Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt, down in the catacombs. According to a report from Vatican Radio this week, the Holy See has established new provisions for the celebration of the sacrament of matrimony by members of the faithful who are attached to the Society of St. Pius X. Now, these new provisions are part of a number of growing meetings and initiatives aimed at bringing the society into full communion. Because as the Titanic goes under the icy brine, that, of course, is priority number one for the Vatican these days. God knows why. Now, of course, coming from the Vatican, these new provisions are themselves subject to several additional provisions, as you might expect. In a letter approved by Pope Francis, Cardinal Gerhard Müller reports that, quote, insofar as possible, the local diocesan bishop is to grant the delegation to assist at the marriage to a priest of the diocese, such as the priest may receive the consent of the parties during the marriage rite, followed by the celebration of the Mass, which may be celebrated then by a priest of the society, end quote. A little convoluted, but I think I see what he's getting at. So how about that? And I assume, of course, that this generous provision will apply to the divorced traditional Catholics who also want to get married inside the Society of St. Pius X. I mean, these days, right, that's kind of a given. 2 priests for every SSPX marriage. And remember, there's a lot of that going on in the Society of St. Pius X these days, since the Society faithful tend to have large families and actually believe in marriage and tend to go through that little formality before living together, as opposed to the majority of most nominal Catholics today already in full communion with the Vatican. Now, you guys in the Society of St. Pius X can finally start getting your marriages regularized, since obviously, and according to the Vatican, not one of y'all has been married for the past quarter century in the system that was set up by Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre. Kind of problematic. But there's more. According to the Vatican, not 1 but 2 priests. You get 2 priests. The society guy, who gets to stand there and look like an idiot, and the real priest, who makes sure that the marriage is actually valid in this case. And this is presented as a solution. I have no problem. I mean, if the Vatican were to come out and say, thank God for the Society of St. Pius X having preserved the traditions. It's been great for 25 years, good work. Now it's time for us to get, restore tradition to the church. Thanks, guys in the society, for what you've done. Have a great day. I'd be all for something like this. But the thing is, the Vatican isn't doing that. And as luck would have it, one of those newly approved marriages actually took place already, and Rob and I were able to go down and capture it all on tape. It's a Novus Ordo priest was sent into a Society of St. Pius X chapel to make sure the bridal couple was legally married and in full communion with the Vatican. So here, take a look at this. This is what that looked like. Boom! Full communion, baby. Hallelujah. Okay, so obviously that was not actually a Society of St. Pius X wedding. We're just trying to make a point. As far as I know, in fact, the society isn't exactly popping champagne corks over this strange Vatican solution that, as I see it, couldn't possibly be more insulting to the priests of the Society of St. Pius X. I mean, really, if Pope Francis is so worried about the invalidity of the Society of St. Pius X marriages, which, come to think of it, in and of itself seems a little funny, since he remains utterly untroubled by the invalid marriages of those divorced and divorced Catholics who want to become remarried, come hitched for the second time. He's not worried about that. But leaving that aside, if some sort of Jansenistic hot flash keeps His Holiness sleepless at night over the Society's illegal marriages or invalid marriages, then why doesn't he just regularize the Society of St. Pius X? What is this game? What's it all about? What's he waiting for? What's with this pharisaical nonsense of sending a Novus Ordo priest in to officiate at Society of St. Pius X marriages? Or if that's not possible, evidently he's allowing for the local bishop to authorize a society priest to do it himself. In any case, is anyone actually taking this seriously? What's going on here? Anyone taking it? Especially the Novus guy, by the way, the Novus Ordo priest. He's already stretched out for months when it comes to conducting matrimony and marriages in his own church. And now, from decree by the Vatican, he's got to run over and babysit the local SSPX priest every Saturday afternoon, too. This is absurd. And you know what? At the end of the day, Cardinal Mueller, you guys have made a total mess of our church, right? I mean, you know that, right? You're aware of that. This is the biggest crisis in the history of the church. And I guess some of us are just kind of wondering just exactly why you're not just a tiny bit more worried about the crisis at hand. How do you even find the time to consternate about straitjacketing traditional Catholics, bullying us into compliance with your agenda, when the church is going up in flames all around you? You know what? The faith actually survived in those horrible traditional Catholic chapels, the Society of St. Pius X chapels, those evil schismatics over there for the past half century. Thanks to the Vatican's schismatic whipping boy, Archbishop Lefebvre, it survived, while you guys in the Vatican were busy closing down churches by the thousands and managing the mass defection of the Catholic faithful out of the Novus Ordo establishment for whatever reason, or whatever you were doing. Playing with the liturgies, playing with the kiddies, whatever it was. People got fed up by the tens of thousands, millions, and have left. You ever think about that, Your Eminence? As you look out over the desolate city that used to be the Catholic Church, what happened? Why are you so worried about traditional Catholics coming under your thumb? Why aren't you worried about grabbing all those people who have left the church, the millions who've left the church? The ship is sinking. And you guys are all running around punching tickets and making sure everyone's papers are just in order. You're positively obsessed with gaining control of the tiny pockets of Catholic life where the faith actually survived in the church without Vatican interference. Why? Why are you obsessed? What about those hundreds of millions of Catholics in full communion who've simply left the church? You worried about them? Do they need to be in full communion? Or are they also well on their way to the happy place, just like the atheists that Pope Francis so famously said are going to heaven as well? Well, this whole thing isn't a trad cat conspiracy. Everyone knows that. According to the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, get this, the number of former Catholic adults in America in 2016, those raised Catholic who no longer self-identify as Catholic, is now 30 million strong. 30 million of them have left. The same study shows that nearly 80% of Catholics no longer go to Mass. And that's, again, just in the United States. In Europe, that would be a ridiculously high number of folks still going to Mass. And they're in full communion, too. So what is this full communion buying anybody these days? The neo-Catholic author, luminary, Matthew Kelly, has a book out called The 4 Signs of Dynamic Catholics. And he tells us in that book that according to his research, it now shows that only a paltry 7% of all Catholics are in fact dynamic Catholics. In other words, faithful Catholics. Only 30% of Americans who are raised Catholic are still practicing. You get it? 70% of those who were baptized and raised Catholic in America have defected. 79% of those who have dropped the name Catholic and claim no religious affiliation at all anymore, they have done so by the age of 23. In other words, in a few years, the Catholic Church is going to be dead because the young people are simply dropping out in the Church of Full Communion. You can go on and on. I got more. Dale Hudson on Catholic.org says that polls now show that more than 60% of American Catholics say they do not believe in the real presence of Christ in the youth. 60%. But they're all in full communion. And now the Vatican is going to help the SSPX get on track. We're from the Vatican, and we're here to help. Really? Nice job so far, guys. You'll forgive me, Cardinal Mueller, for not getting overly exercised by the Society of St. Pius X's lack of due canonical status at this point. Holy cow. Holy cow. Are you serious? In the middle of all this, the Vatican is trying to jack the SSPX of all people into full communion, whatever that means. Why? They don't care about full communion in the Vatican, or any communion for that matter, whatever full and partial communion even means, I don't know. But when it comes to that lady Lutheran bishop that the Pope's always hanging out with, I don't think he's too worried about her lack of full communion. So what are we talking about here? What's going on? Is the Vatican really worried about souls that are not in full communion? Or is this just all about gaining control over the tiny bit of opposition to the revolution of Vatican II that's still left in the church today? I'm sorry, but the inconsistencies here, the glaring contradictions are just too much to take anymore. It's getting ridiculous. They're wrecking the church. They're enabling heretics everywhere. They're going to rehabilitate Martin Luther as we predicted down here. Get ready for St. Martin Luther because that's coming soon. They're raping our kids physically and spiritually, and then they have the audacity to demand obedience. Oh, they're so pious. To demand obedience and to hold the threat of schism over the heads of little old ladies to prevent them from in any way standing in opposition to their diabolical agenda. This is nonsense. Come on, folks. And let's not forget, we're at the end of the continuum here. Here's William Buckley on the traditional Latin Mass. Take a look.
Bill, when you were talking, you described your reactions as a practicing Catholic, listening to the liturgy as such. I'm sure you weren't just saying that because you like Latin or something like that. Have you the sense that there has been a general deterioration of the Catholic spirit as such, and the substitution of something of a more ecumenical Christian?
Yes, it seems to me that the emphasis has been communitarian, and there's something about Latin which it seems to me gave you a sense of privacy. There is the Mass is a mystery. Supernatural, the supernatural is a mystery. The Church is founded on certain mysteries, and there's a sense in which it is, I think, culturally consistent that a special vocabulary should be used in describing or in engaging in such a liturgy, so that I think that Latin had going for it not only that it was traditional and universal, but also precisely that it was not vernacular, in the same sense in which I object to I object to the elimination of the vocative thee and thou, substituting you. It seems to me that that is an informalization of a subject which should continue to be dealt with rather formally.
Well, let me take one sector of what you just said. When you were being educated, you know, in your young days, was there a stress on what we've been calling here the communitarian? Did that ever come up?
No, there were only a few prayers even said jointly, and that was at the very end of the Mass. Now you're praying jointly half the time.
Most of the time, if you're praying at all.
Yeah.
And not being annoyed. Though I'm betraying my prejudice there. But in your concept of the history of the Church as such, you know, was this communitarian idea a very prevalent idea in the past? Well, and was it lost along the way?
I think it's unquestionably true that the Mass of the catacombs put together the believers in a sense of fraternity. They felt a bond that people tend to feel when they are being oppressed. The same kind of bond that gives that special exuberance to Roman Catholicism in Eastern Europe.
There you go. There's Buckley. He gets it exactly right. And he's talking about a catacomb, incidentally enough. Did you hear that, Rob, about that?
I like that.
Talking about the catacombs. Catholics had to go into the catacombs because wayward modernist shepherds 50 years ago destroyed the Mass. They destroyed our Mass. They uncrowned our king. They bulldozed our sanctuaries. They undermined our family life. They drove our children into apostasy. And they humiliated the bride of Christ in the modern world. And it's not just Francis, by the way. Enough with that, right? You're all tired of Francis, so are we. It's the whole ugly modernist revolution we're talking about here. Francis was inevitable. He's not a cause, he's an effect. He was inevitable all along. And to be surprised by his pontificate at this point suggests a failure on our part to understand the nature of the revolution. He was always coming. Remember Assisi?
The historic event was first created by John Paul II, and at that time it was attended by representatives from the world's major religions. Interreligious dialogue can't be understood nowadays without Assisi. The meeting was a huge step forward in relations with non-Christian beliefs, because until then, the Catholic Church had only reached out to other Christians. Despite the advances, some say there's still more to be done to reach a fuller interreligious dialogue.
You think that was Francis's fault? You think Bergoglio knew about that? No. It's been going on for a long time, so we're down here in the catacombs preparing to start all over again tonight, folks. It's November of 1967, and we're bringing out of mothballs all of the old polemics now against the new Mass, against dialogue, against the new rosary, altar girls, false ecumenism, the inverted Catholic sanctuaries, table altars, torn out communion rails, communion in the hand, all of it, the whole new orientation of the Catholic Church. Why? Because thanks to Francis, we have a more receptive audience today than we've ever had in the past, and we need to take advantage of that. Everyone throughout the church now, except apparently for the folks inside the Vatican, know that the Catholic Church is in total crisis, total disarray, and that this was largely self-imposed after the church had fallen into the hands of the modernists, and that its coming out party was the Second Vatican Council, whether you like it or not. We just were informed right before we shot this show tonight that our brother John Vennari has passed away. This is extremely difficult for us to assimilate, to deal with, certainly to talk about right now. So I'm not even going to go into it, other than to say that this man was a brother, he was a dear friend, and a very important ally. And I don't know when exactly our video will be posted, but I assume it might be before his funeral. So I wanted people to know that he's going to be buried on Saturday in Buffalo, New York. And more importantly than anything else, please pray for this wonderful, wonderful human being. You know, I talked to him on his deathbed a couple weeks ago, and he was really going through the last stages of his cancer, colon cancer. And it was a very difficult conversation, and I was losing it because we've been friends forever. John wasn't. John was very steady. He knew he was dying. He was talking about his funeral already, his preparations. And the last thing he said to me was, you need to keep the fight. He goes, you must continue the fight for Catholic restoration, for traditional Catholicism. Please never stop. And I just want to say, as John now has passed and gone on before us, that's exactly what we intend to do. You know, and this program was more or less inspired by the passing of John, who always charitably continued the fight in the Catholic restoration. So we dedicate this little program of ours tonight to John's memory, and I ask you please to remember to pray for the repose of the soul of our friend and brother, John Vennari.